evening all. I just first like to explain, I was going to put some decent sort of work clothes on tonight because I am working, and I thought I'd look a bit respectable for a change, but I did a 5-mile run this morning, so I've actually got compression leggings on and flat boots. So if you see me grimacing, you know exactly why. How do I follow that? Oh, our Father God. And I want you to remember that while I'm talking tonight, and I'm going to refer back to that later. The fact that I know that I'm his child, and that's who I am, and I am loved unconditionally. I've got so much to say, and it's a bit all jumbled, so I'm just going to leave it to God to get it out there how he wants it out there. I think I'll start off with a bit about what God has promised me over the last, it's 18 months now. Just before I started here at Sedgley, I was going through a period of, I didn't actually know, I've said this before, where I didn't know where I wanted to go to church. But God quite clearly told me and gave me a vision that I was going to be, because he gives me pictures, I was going to be in a community centre, and I was going to be working there full time. And I couldn't see how that was ever going to happen, because as a social worker working for the local authority in quite a senior position, I'd got a reasonably good wage, in all honesty, that the family relied on to pay the bills. So how do you walk away from that to work in a community centre where generally the wages aren't that good? And I couldn't see how it was ever going to happen. And I knew it had something to do with my faith, and it had to be serving God. Well, as it happened, the council went through a major reshuffle, and my job was going. And although I couldn't get redundancy, being a social worker, because we're not allowed to have redundancy, I was offered 2 jobs. One that I sort of wanted and I knew I could do, and it would be quite easy, but I didn't really want to do it. And a job that I really didn't want to do, that was where I was wanted, and that's where the bosses wanted me to be. I knew I'd hate it. It would be really hard work. It would be long hours. And it would still be working with those children that really should be in care and weren't. And I would have to continue to support them, living in a home where I knew they shouldn't be. So on the morning it was coming to, I needed to make a decision. Which job did I go to? The one where the managers wanted me, or the ones where they didn't want me, and would they make my life a misery there? And I said to God, God, you really need to show me what it is you want me to do, because I don't want either of these jobs. And I feel ungrateful. You've provided me with options, and I don't want either of them. So you tell me what it is you want me to do. Well, at the time I was working for Heather Dudfield, who's got Excel Community Church. Well, it's Excel Church, the Bilston Community Church in Bilston, funnily enough. And she was off. She had to leave early that day. And I must admit, I was teasing her, because she's got a community centre manager. But she had to sign a contract to rent some office space out to a charity. And I was like, well, what does your community centre manager do? What do you employ her for? How does she feel about this? And I was joking with her, well, a little bit. And she's like, oh, shut up, Kay, shut up. It's too important. I need to be there. It means too much to the church. And she is, and she won't mind me saying this, she is a bit of a control freak. So off she went to a meeting to get this contract signed. And little did I know, it was actually Safe Families for Children. Well, that afternoon I was particularly fed up, and I was looking through the jobs board just to see, come on God, I prayed to you this morning, let there be a job on there I really want to do. And the phone went, and it was Heather, and she was like, Kay, do you want a job? And I was like, well, funnily enough, I'm just looking at the jobs. She says, well, they've just signed all the contracts, and they've told me, Christian charity, they've asked me, do you know a social worker who is a practicing Christian? We need one. And she says, I instantly thought of you. Now, we only put, and I can say that now, I'm finally moving over psychologically. We only advertise jobs for a very short period, because we believe that, 1, we're desperate normally for a worker, but 2, that God will give us the right person. So I applied for the job. The wages, funnily enough, matched the wages that I was earning. So that even, and you don't get social work wages working for charities, it just doesn't happen. So I applied for the job, got an interview, went for the interview, and because there was no office space, particularly local, the interview was in a hotel, in the restaurant there. And I was doing really well. I could tell I was doing really well, because you can tell, can't you, when an interview and it's all going well. And then I got to this one question and I was like, oh. And although I should have been able to answer it, I couldn't. And you know, when you know you're rambling and you know it's all rubbish. And I was like, oh, please, Lord, just let me find the right words. Well, sometimes God doesn't answer prayer how we want him to, does he? God just set the fire alarm off. So off we all went outside on the car park, got chatting about, you know, stuff and nonsense. And when we went back in, and I have repeated this, so my current boss now knows it, they just moved on to the next question. I was like, praise the Lord. So there I was. They offered me the job, matched my wages. I can still pay the bills for the family, working in a community centre for a Christian-based charity. Now, you tell me that that's not God's intervention. So I just thought I'd share that with you. Romans 12, verse 9, tells us that love must be sincere, hate what is evil, and cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love. Honour one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervour, serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. Now, Safe Families for Children, I'm just going to give you a bit of background because I just think it's such a fabulous story. It was actually established in the UK by Sir Peter Vardy, who you probably know his name from the car group. Reg Vardy was his dad. When Reg Vardy died, Sir Peter Vardy took over the family business and ran it very successfully. His story is quite amazing, really, when you listen to it. And although, just a bit of an aside, you know, I like a bit of an aside, he's like a real true Tory boy, but his heart is so in the right place. And when I met him recently, it left me in all sorts of turmoils because we should so disagree on everything, but we didn't, because he has got such a good Christian moral basis. He actually sold his company for millions, lots and lots of money either which way. And he's ploughed it into philanthropical charities, things. And the reason why he chose Safe Families for Children was he'd been chosen by the government to run a prison. And while he was running this prison, he, I suppose, was surprised and found it difficult to believe how many of the people that were in prison had actually gone through care. And these repeat offenders had lived, you know, much of their lives in the care system. And if so many of offenders have actually come from the care system, then the care system, obviously, it ain't caring enough, is it? It's not doing what it needs to do. So that's when he got in touch with Dr. David Anderson, and he based the model of Safe Families on what Dr. David Anderson, who is a child psychologist, had set up in Chicago. He set that up in Chicago back in 2003, and he was another one that had seen that actually, historically, the extended family in the community would have helped out families in need, wouldn't they? So if your nan want looking after you, or your auntie who lived next door and round the corner, then actually auntie so-and-so, who wasn't an auntie, who lived next door, but you'd known forever, would be looking after you. And they would always step in a crisis, and they would provide the food, they would provide the childcare, they would provide the transport, they would provide the emotional support, and everything else that a family needs in crisis would be provided in the heart of the community. But I don't know about you, but we don't have that anymore. Urban families are increasingly socially isolated. They haven't got that extended family. Quite often people will move away from family or fall out with family. And talking to your neighbours, I don't know about you, my neighbour hates me. I don't know what I've ever done to him. I think it's an historical thing. He hated the people before us, so if you live in our house, then My others like me, so they must be all right. And even the Wolves fan across the road likes me. So I'm not all bad. So what he wanted to do, he saw all these children in a family that were being traumatised by crushing circumstances and emotions that were just out of control. Now, children need adults whose emotions are in control and safe, and they need boundaries. And he realised that this was putting them at risk of neglect and abuse, and the effects of that would be long-lasting, and that would include physical and psychological trauma. Now, I suppose I know a bit about this, but I'm sure you all do too. The child welfare system was created to protect children and keep families intact. But actually, it's overburdened. There are too many children out there with needs that are living at risk. And actually, there's not enough social workers, there's not enough support workers. And every year, we find doctors, counsellors, teachers, and other professionals, the odd neighbour, to be fair, we have got the odd neighbour, who will call and call and call again because they're increasingly concerned about a child that's living in circumstances that they feel a child shouldn't live in. But because of this staggering demand and the shortage in workers, you tend to find that the local authority will only intervene after the child has suffered blatant abuse or neglect. So quite often, they will only step in once the abuse is underway. And to be fair to the local authorities, they're really trying to step up their early help work. But increasingly, early help work is with children. They're on edge of care. Now, to me, early help shouldn't be when you're on the edge of care. It should be when things start to go wrong. So families are left at breaking point to fend for themselves. And even though the system is only reaching a fraction of the families who need to, and actually it's not having very good effects on when they are working with a family, it comes at an absolutely exorbitant cost. And even when the family does qualify for statutory intervention, the current model is seen as a negative experience by the families. And I think you would all agree that, you know, unless you've had some social care involvement, it's actually really scary. You know, if someone threatens, and I'll use the word threatens, or I'm going to ring social care on you, it's not often a family will go, woohoo, help at last. Because actually it's like, oh, they're going to take my children off me. You know, and in all honesty, if someone said that to me, I'd be like, yeah, carry on. They're not going to do anything in any case. Sorry. So the children is being left in a harmful and sometimes dangerous situation because you can't remove a child until you've got the evidence. And sometimes I've seen some horrific circumstances that, you know, everyone that knows me well, I have got a heart, I hide it well. And even some of the families I've worked with have actually brought me to tears, which is like, don't do. And then the families that are being worked with, they feel coerced and intimidated. And I've witnessed this. Children need to be accommodated, but we haven't got the evidence. So what you actually say to the parent is, sign your child over to the local authority where they can be helped, protected, and we can get you the help you need. And the families will often say no because they're terrified that once the child is gone, they're not going to be coming back. So what you say to them is, well, you can either sign them over to me or we can call the police because the police can remove them. And do you really want that child having all the upset of the policeman coming to take them away? And I know you wouldn't use, I'm exaggerating, but that is what is said to these families. You either sign the child over or we have to call the police because they are the only ones with the power at that time to be able to remove the child. And even then, though parents are encouraged to get the help and the support they need, often their emotions, their mental health, and their lifestyle is so chaotic and jumbled that they struggle to be able to prioritise or take on board the necessary information they need to be able to make lasting changes. Because you show me, if you're in the middle of a crisis, have you got the mental well-being to actually think logically? If your child has been removed from you and you haven't got a date when they're coming back, can you think about anything else other than how do I get that child back? So that's where Safe Families comes in. Can we move on to the next slide? And another. That's it. So what Safe Families is for, and was set up for, was to actually prevent child neglect and abuse, to stabilise families in times of crisis and reduce the number of children taken into care. And it has been proven to be highly effective in stabilising families, because what we can do at Safe Families is there was a lady that our Nottingham office dealt with recently who was having a real mental breakdown, and we thought, and she thought, that she needed to go into hospital to get her mental health stabilised. And because she'd worked with Safe Families previously, she knew that she could call on us and that we would take her children to a host family where they would have a fabulous time. She knew she would only need to be in hospital for a couple of days and then the children would be returned to her. So we are able to stabilise that situation without it becoming my children are being taken into care and the stigma that's attached to that. Actually, they're going to stay with friends, as people often become, while I get myself sorted. In America, they've seen reductions of up to 50% in the numbers of children entering the foster care system. And when you think that's that's absolutely massive. And the accountants amongst us would think, whoa, what a financial saving. But actually the parents amongst us would think, wow, think of the emotions that have been protected in all of that. In America, Safe Families is now operational in 65 cities across 35 states. And over 20,000 children have benefited from their intervention. It's not so big yet in the UK, but we are getting there. We are slowly getting there. We work in Mersey, Manchester, the Midlands. And the Midlands, I love the Midlands. The Midlands is massive. It basically goes from the seaside on the east coast to almost Wales. We're not quite there yet, but it's massive. The south coast, Scotland and Wales. And we've provided over 1,700 respite bed nights to children. Just last year in Nottingham, because they've been going a bit longer than we have in the Black Country, they were able to directly attribute an 11% reduction in children going into care to the support that was provided by Safe Families for Children. Now, one of those families was actually in Derby, and it was a mum whose children needed accommodating. She needed a break. She was on the verge of a breakdown, but she couldn't cope with the fact that her children would be away from her. So a family in Boston, because we have links, you know, said, do you know what? I'll take all the family. I'll take mum and the children. I'll have them all. So this family went over to Boston and stayed. They were supposed to stay for the weekend, but they stayed overnight. On the Saturday morning, mum was on the phone. You got to get me back home. Get me back home. I can't stand this. Get me back home. Now you'd think, oh, what on earth happened? Why would I want to be that person that inflicts that on that family? When Dale, my colleague, was driving her home, he talked about music, he talked about the roads, the weather, anything, but not about what had gone on. And the mum eventually turned round to him and she said, what do you lot do in church? He said, well, what do you mean? Well, what do you do in church? And he says, well, depends what church you go to. They're all different. They all do something different, but basically we love God and we praise God and we worship him and we pray to him. And, you know, that's what we do in church. And she went, why did that family want me? And he says, because they just wanted to show you that you were loved. Because God loves us. And we wanted to show you that God loves you, we love you. And you know, that absolutely freaked that mum out because she had never been loved unconditionally. Her family, her parents, her partners, of her children, no one had ever loved her and wanted nothing back. There wasn't a catch to it. They hadn't abused, you know, they'd all abused her. She'd never received something for nothing. And it totally blew her mind. So when we go back to that hymn, and that's where I said I wanted you to keep that in mind. And I'm loved by you. That's who I am. She'd never known that. She'd never known that love. And the lovely thing is now, she's actually a practicing Christian in a big church in Derby. And not only is she a practicing Christian, but she's actually a really active member of the Christian community and serving others. So that's what we try and do. And I've got 1,001 stories about where we've hosted children. And I could be here all night, but I think you'd probably get a bit tired of them. Can we have the next slide? So there's 3 ways that we ask volunteers to help families. And that's safe, short stay hosting for children, or sometimes the whole family. We had one family a couple of weeks back now. It was a vicar in down by Bedford. And we put 3 children as an emergency hosting with him. And bless him, by the end of, I think it was about 5 days they were there, the little 8-year-old was saying, "Can I call you Grandad?" So he was there Easter, their half term, and their mum was living in a refuge for an abused family. Mum was supposed to be in hospital, but she'd actually disappeared with her partner. We don't know where she went. But the children had a fabulous week with this man. They went swimming. They actually hosted a couple of charity fundraising events for the church. They helped cook the food. They acted as waiter and waitress. They earned money, tips. And actually that weekend they spent their earnings. So those children now know what it is to earn money and spend money that you've earned. They had an absolutely fabulous time. Others, it's for parents that need to go into hospital just overnight. We had one of those recently. The children had a fabulous time, and the parents know where the children are. They meet the volunteers generally before they go, so they know who the children are staying with. A lot of people use this just to test out what being a foster carer would be like. But some people just do it because they don't want to be a foster carer, but they've got love and they've got a room that they can open up to a child in need. Befriending support, we say for parents, but it's for children as well. And I think this all depends on where your heart lies. I've made it no secret that I generally don't like people very much. So if I like you, you're highly honoured. But even I am a volunteer who's a befriender. And I swore I wouldn't be, because I was like, I do my street pastors, I do this, I do that. I am working for God. God doesn't need me working, well, he needs me working for Safe Families, but not as a volunteer. And just before Christmas, I went to visit a family who, the mom was insistent the children were going to be removed for Christmas. One of them had to go. And she's a really good mom who works and has never had any problems, no social care intervention. But she'd had a massive knee operation, which meant she couldn't weight bear. And she hadn't been able to weight bear for 4.5 weeks by the time I saw her. So I walked in, and the first thing to hit me was the smell, because they'd got animals. And the second thing to hit me was the sight in the kitchen, which was an absolute, well, it was a bomb site. She was sleeping in the living room. There was just stuff everywhere. And she just couldn't cope with that anymore. And she knew that wasn't how her children were meant to be having Christmas. So why would she want them there? She knew they deserved better. So I rocked up, as I do, typical social worker. Sorry, love, nothing I can do for you till after Christmas. And she just broke down. She cried and cried and cried. And she says, that's what everyone has told me. I have never asked for anything. And when my children are living like this, no one will help me. Now, she got a 17-year-old daughter who was a highly functioning autistic young lady who was at college doing her A-levels, was working at Tesco's part-time, was being the total carer for a mother. So that was everything that you can imagine of someone that can't get upstairs to the toilet, the daughter was having to deal with, was caring for her 8-year-old brother. And she suffers with this condition that gives her chronic pain. And the more tired she is, the more pain she's in. And she was like, how can I put her through this anymore? So do you know what? Guess who's her volunteer now? And do you know what I do? I do the hoovering. Because they've got a dog. And when you don't hoover up when you've got a dog, your house is full of hair and it stinks. And do you know what? I made that woman's Christmas because I hoovered. So every 2 or 3 weeks, because I don't go around very often, I pop round and I do the hoovering and I do a bit of washing up. And this lady has started sorting the clutter from her house out because actually she's got time to be able to think and to breathe. And her daughter has started taking time for herself. She started being a 17-year-old and going to the gym with her support worker. And we are friends. We are friends of the families. Some people take the children out. Now, those that know me well know I like children even less than I like adults. So I definitely wouldn't dream of that, but that's fine because I don't need to take the children out because there are people out there that love children. So they will do that and they take them for a game of football or they take them to choose a Christmas tree or they just take them to have some fun. And there are so many children out there that have no fun whatsoever. And they just show them what fun is and they show them that they can have a life outside of electronics. I know that's really hard, Aaron, for some people to believe, life outside electronics. So that's the befriending service. And what I love about it is when someone volunteers for Safe Families, we don't assign you a case. It's not like when you're at work and you get given something. What we do is we send an email out and we give you a background of the circumstances. And if that touches your heart, then you get in touch with us. So you're not going to be forced to work with a 10-year-old who wants to play football. You're not going to be forced to look after the toddler. And actually, you're not going to be forced to work with the parents because they're volunteers. So they do exactly what God draws them to and to the people that touches them. We have people taking people to craft classes, to mother and toddler groups, because we don't just want that person to be the only person that comes into that person's life. There was a lot of people in that, weren't there? We actually want them to integrate them into their community. So when the time that Safe Families is involved with them actually comes to an end, then they don't need us anymore. And quite often the volunteer will stay in touch, but they don't need to if they don't want to. But people find that they've either got through their crisis or they're now part of a community where they know where to go to for support. And then the last thing that we ask people to do, if they feel led that way, is just donations of basic goods and services. So that can be, we needed a rug a couple of weeks back. We sometimes need food for families if they've used their food bank vouchers up. We could possibly need someone to take the rug from one house to another. Gardening. Anything really that is sort of time. We're not asking for massive, we would never ask for a massive donation. But, you know, occasionally we get people going out if they've had a baby, we need a baby hosting, we may ask for the loan of a travel cot, car seats, just things that people often have that they no longer need, and they can be passed on. Can we have the next screen, please? So that's how Safe Families works. You've got the family up there at the top with the baby. And Safe Families literally come around them. So you've got the resource friends that may not be able to volunteer, providing any needs they have. We've got the family friends that come alongside either the children, the parents, or both. We've got the host families for any emergency, like accommodation needs. And the lovely thing about that is actually when children go and stay with a host family, they officially do not become looked after children. So there is no ongoing impact as if the local authority had done that. The family coach, if I could have rubbed her out, if I was a technical expert, I would have done, because we're reviewing that role at the moment. So please just ignore that. And then we've got the church coordinator. What the church coordinator does, if a church has got quite a few volunteers, although we as workers check on volunteers and make sure volunteers are kept emotionally and physically safe, they will also do that. They will just check in with volunteers that everything's going well. Next one. What we're doing is we're working with local authorities, and I love the fact that local authorities can see that we're fulfilling a need that actually they haven't got the staff or the resources to do. Because quite often local authorities will get in touch with us and they have all the professionals in the world and they're trying to work with these families, and they'll say, please, can you send a volunteer in because we are getting no work done. Because I went out to see a lady whose daughter had been sexually exploited, quite a serious case. The offenders had been prosecuted and they'd actually been locked away. The daughter had got all the help that she needed, but that help was actually supporting mom, because when they went round to the home, mom needed someone to offload to. Now, if your daughter has been sexually exploited, she didn't want to be sharing that with her 70-year-old mom, this child's grandmother, because it's just too horrific to think about. You know, you can't have that conversation sometimes in families. So she just needed someone that she could have coffee with, that actually she could talk through how she was feeling, that wouldn't get too emotionally involved or attached. So we're actually providing a service. We get a lot of coffee requests. So if anybody likes drinking coffee, whoa, is this the charity for you? Tea is acceptable. Water, lemonade, whatever your choice is. We have a lot of mums who just need to talk. And the local authorities have taken on board that we're providing a service that they can't. Now, locally, we're working with Sandwell and Walsall. We're not in Dudley yet, but I say yet. We've had talks with Dudley, and this is where God is good. The person I met with was actually my boss's boss, who didn't want me to leave, and on the day I was leaving said to me, Kay, if you realise that you've made a mistake, please just come and see me. Please come back and tell me. So when we went to see her to discuss what services we could provide, one of the things she asked was, is Kay going to be in charge of the Black Country office? And I'm like, yeah, that's my team. And actually, she knows what she's getting when she gets me. And bless her, she's still interested. So that's going at the moment to the heads of service. She's agreed it in principle, they just need to sign it off. But the person that told her to speak to us is one of the heads of service. So I'm guessing they wouldn't have done that if they'd got no intentions. So one of the prayers we need is that we get Dudley, because that would just be our next step of covering the Black Country. Talking of the Black Country office, there should be 4 of us, but there's currently 2 of us. So we're quite busy at the moment. We're quite overstretched. The job that I turned up to do, I do it occasionally, but bless him, my boss does most of it, because I'm just covering the other things that need doing. We split into 2 sort of services. We've got people that recruit the volunteers and make sure they're kept safe. And then we've got people that work with the families, our family service managers, and they make sure that the families are getting everything that they need, while also looking after the volunteers. And I've got Nikki here with me tonight. Do you want to just... Nikki's my FSM. Bless her. I've not scared her off yet.
Hi. So hi, I'm Nikki, and a little bit about me. I was a teacher, and actually when I was a teacher, I did love teaching, but actually what I really liked doing was talking to the parents and finding out why it was that little Johnny always jumped for the banana first before everybody else could get to it, or why they were often late for school. And I found that that was where my heart really was. And so from teaching, I moved into children's services, and I was a family support worker working under social services, which was a huge eye-opener, I have to say. And I used to go into families' homes and sit with families, and I think I was quite protected, really. I was quite shocked at how many families I went to, this is over in Wolverhampton, were isolated, didn't know anybody in their communities, didn't see anybody through the week, had nowhere to go, had no friends, and most shockingly, no family at all. And a lot of children are living in homes that they don't leave the house. And I was sitting in one home one day listening to this mum tell me what her problems were. And I thought, oh, do you know what? If I knew some Christians from that church around the corner, I wish I could just say to them, could you pop in and see so-and-so once a week? And I had this real desire. I made a few contacts, but working for the local authority, that wasn't always looked upon most, in a positive way. So it didn't kind of work. So when I heard about Safe Families, I thought I dreamed it up. Honestly, my heart leapt. And as I was working for the local authority, a bit like Kay as well, God was so in my move to Safe Families. I was a family support worker, but I just kept thinking, there's more. I'm okay with this practical stuff, and I can do that, but there's another level. These people, in a nutshell, need Jesus. They need freedom from darkness. There's so much need here that is beyond just practical, although I know practical is really important as well. So Wolverhampton, funnily enough, went through a restructuring, as they do every 3 years, I think, in children's services. And I'm thinking, do you know what? God, is this the time that I go? And we were offered redundancy. And at the time, Joe and I, my husband, we're volunteers with Safe Families. And so we look after, we had children to go and choose a Christmas tree. And we actually love having them. And I was working part-time for Safe Families. They were going, we've got no money, but we'll give you a few hours. So I was working with them. And as the redundancy came close, I'm thinking, I'm just going to take it. And I'm going to say to our big boss, just let me work. I'll volunteer. I just want to work for Safe Families. Anyway, the week I was made redundant, I was offered a job with Safe Families, and my heart just leapt because I just knew I was in the right place for me. And I think that we just sense, apart from all the practical work and the work of the local authority, God is so in this work. And the thing that makes me most excited is, as community churches, I know that you have a heart to be out there, and that's where I want to be, in a church where people want to reach out to their community. But this is the local authority saying to churches, okay then, it's your turn. We've tried everything we can. Now actually they see that churches can step up and meet this need. And I think that's the most exciting thing about working for Safe Families and for being part of community and being a Christian charity. And it is amazing to see what difference. When you were telling the stories, I was thinking about a mum I visited, and I was sat with her, and very dysfunctional background. Again, her mum, sister, brother, all had just taken advantage of her, used her, just nobody, a partner who had physically abused her. So she's on her own now with a little boy. And I went to ask, what is it you want? And she said, just like someone to come and show me what to do. Help me, tell me which phone calls I should make, or how can I get this job? What do I need to do? And then she said to me, I've never had a mum who said to me, I love you, or put her arm around me, or said, come on, we can do this together. And so I wrote the email that went out, and we've got a lovely mum who works and lives in the community, goes to a community church, who said, I can do that. I can go and be a mum. Just get alongside, say, what is it we need to sort out? This girl's got aspirations. She's got what it takes. She just needs that encouragement. She needs someone to get alongside her. And that's really where our volunteers, the role is just about being what we know as Christians we are anyway, that community, about to families that aren't. And I think being given links to vulnerable families in our community is a privilege, isn't it? Absolutely. Is there anything else you wanted me to say specifically about them? I think that's it, isn't it? That's family support manager role in terms of working with families, and then, is that all right?
Okay. Thank you. And I think that is the thing, that actually they've tried everything that they have got left to try, and it's still not working. Um, and I think as Christians, Steve prayed it earlier, let these seats be full of new Christians. But actually, we've got families out there that are hurting. We were talking the one day, and we discovered that Nick is working with one mum and I'm working with mum, and they're actually sisters, aren't they? And that's how damaging their upbringing was. And I'm actually a little bit ashamed to say that their parents are Christians. And what the one said to me was that every Sunday the mum and dad would go to church and praise God, and then every Sunday afternoon they'd come home and abuse them. And I just think that's heartbreaking. But she's still glad that I'm a Christian, and she loves that I'm a Christian. And when I first met her, she was absolutely off somewhere, and all she did was scream and shout, not at me, just she was having one of the worst days of her life. And when she saw a social worker a few days later, she says, "Can you please apologise to that lady? She's a Christian, and you shouldn't speak like that in front of Christians, bless her." So I would just say that, it's one thing to pray, to have seats filled, but sometimes we need to go out there and hold people's hands to bring them in, because not everyone has had a good experience of what Christianity is. And actually, some people have never experienced Christianity at all. And I say Christianity, actually, they've never experienced God as a father. In 1 Peter 4:10, he says, "Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms." And do you know what? That's spot on, because I cannot take a child to play with them, because that would bore me silly. But do you know what? I can do hoovering. God's given me the gift of hoovering. I quite like hoovering. So I can go and do that. And if I never volunteer for another family ever again, that's fine, because I saved that woman's Christmas. Well, God did, because he sent me. And in Mark 10:45, it says, "For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." And that's what he's called us to do, to actually go out there and serve and to show his love. And if you're like me and you can't do something for nothing, Hebrews 6:10 says, "God is not unjust. He will not forget your work and the love you have shown him as you have helped his people and continue to help them." Now, I know we shouldn't do good service for the rewards that are in heaven, but you know what? It is a little bit nice to know that you've put another jewel in your house. So what I would say is, if I have interested you at all, and again, I would say to you, volunteering is purely on what you want and can provide. There is no expectation at all. If you sign up, you get and go through the training process, you get the emails, and you can delete them all if you want to. But actually, someday there could be one where you can say, "Do you know what? I can meet that. I can meet that commitment. I can meet that time. I can meet what that family needs." So if you want any more information, please, I'm thinking everyone here knows me. Please just come and have a chat with me. And last but not least, we've got a video for you if it works, because I'll put it all together wrong and it won't working on the system. But this just goes to show how safe families can change a family's life. So I hope that just gives you an insight into what I am so blessed to be doing for a living. And like I say, if you can just even give, a little bit of your time just to meet up with someone occasionally to have a coffee, then please just come and see me.